Hello there, good afternoon, and welcome to the second session today of our Green Ambition series, where we're going to be looking at making the transition to ultra-low emission vehicles. Prynawn da chi, croeso cynnes iawn i'r ail sesiwn heddi yn ein cyfres gweledigaeth werdd, lle prynhawn ma, ni'n fod yn edrych ar symud i gerbydau allyriadau isel iawn. To start us off officially, though, I'm going to hand over to television presenter, naturalist and author Iolo Williams for a warm Welsh welcome. It'll be in Welsh with English subtitles, but then the rest of today's session and tomorrow's event will be held in English. Mae croeso chi gysylltu gyda ni'n Gymraeg, wrth gwrs, os oes well gyda chi, gan ddefnyddio'r cyfleuster cwestiwn ag ateb. You're more than welcome to correspond with us in Welsh if you prefer.
Helo na, a croeso i gyfres y weledigaeth werdd busnes Cymru. Iolo Williams ydw i, a dwi'n falch o gyflwyno'r gyfres ddiddorol hon o ddigwyddiadau a greuwyd i gynorthwyo busnesau i ddod yn fwy effeithlon o ran adnoddau. Os ydych chi, fel finnau, a diddordeb brwd mewn cynaladwyedd ac effaith amgylcheddol, yna bydd y gyfres hon yn darparu arweiniad a chymorth i'ch helpu i wneud newidiadau yn eich busnes. Mae tîm arbenigol Busnes Cymru wrth law i gynnig sesiynau cyngor un i un unigryw. Felly, os ydych chi wedi eich ysbrydoli gan yr hyn a glywch chi heddiw, yna cysylltwch â'r tîm i archebu eich sesiwn rhad ac am ddim, lle bydd cynghorwyr yn eich helpu i fapio'ch gweledigaeth werdd a symud ymlaen tuag at ddod yn busnes fwy effeithlon o ran adnoddau. Pob lwc a diolch yn fawr i chi.
Diolch Iolo, thank you very much Iolo, and thank you also to Business Wales for organising this event. So Business Wales is a free service that provides impartial, independent support and advice to people starting, running and growing a business in Wales. It's funded by the Welsh Government and European Regional Development Fund and has an excellent track record for providing innovative events just like this Green Ambition series and training sessions. So this afternoon, we're going to be taking you through the legislative changes, ultra-low emissions vehicle options, the infrastructure considerations, and the economics of transition. Joining us for the presentation, I'm delighted to welcome Jamie Cahoon from Costain and Kelly Thomas from Business Wales. Jamie's expertise comes from his strategic level work in the decarbonised transport infrastructure industry, and Kelly spent 19 years working at strategic level in sustainable resource management in Wales. There'll be an opportunity for live Q&A at the end, but for now, over to you, Chris and Kelly.
Thanks, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. So over to you, Jamie.
Yes, thanks, Sean, and thanks, Kelly. Afternoon, everybody. What we're going to be covering in the next hour is basically to help you transition your fleet to wonderful world of ultra low emission vehicles. I'm going to be looking at the macro UK picture delivering clean road transport. What I mean by there is looking at what the government and private sector are doing to deliver the framework that allows to transition to clean mobility. Then start looking at the clean vehicle and infrastructure options that are available for fleet owners. And then finally looking at an actual plan for how you might transition. So the things you might need to consider and also those infrastructure delivery processes. So first of all, thinking about the macro picture in the UK. So I wanted to start, as I said, looking at that macro picture around the framework that government is putting in place to progress us towards net zero. And this really starts with policy. So since the mid-2000s, government and business efforts to decarbonise the UK have focused mainly on the energy sector, looking to eradicate coal-fired power generation and also promoting investment in renewables. And with around 40% of our electricity now generated from renewables, carbon emissions from energy dropped below those for domestic transport in 2018, making transport the UK's largest emitting sector. So this is obviously the next focus for decarbonisation alongside buildings. So with transport, the aim is to achieve zero tailpipe emissions from all vehicles by 2050 and to seek to reduce the volume of vehicles on our roads. And how we achieve the latter is by introducing modal shift in our reliance on private owned vehicles to other options, and for example, through the use of things like car clubs and more sustainable public transport solutions. So with the big net zero goal ahead, UK government and Welsh government have been developing and introducing a range of policies and laws to drive transport towards clean solutions. So key to this on the left-hand side of the slide are the sales bans on new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030, followed by hybrids in 2035, and then heavy-duty vehicles in 2040. And this timeline recognises that the technology required to decarbonise heavy-duty freight on our roads will take longer to mature. Then on the right, you'll see a number of grant-based initiatives that UK Gov and Welsh Government have put in place to support the transition to ultra-low emission vehicles throughout the UK. That starts with the Rapid Charging Fund to ensure super fast charging options are available across our motorways and A-road system. And I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. And then there's the still to be launched Low Emission Vehicle Infrastructure or Levy Fund that was announced at the last budget. So this fund will help to increase the amount of public charging that's available where people live and where they don't have access to a driveway or off-street charging as they look to transition to clean vehicle options. And then to help to support new EV sales, the government is continuing with the plug-in grant, although the amounts that continue to reduce, and I suspect that post sort of 24-25 budget, this will disappear completely. There are also grant incentives in place to help support the cost of installing charging infrastructure for EVs at work, the workplace charging scheme, and at home charge. However, the home charge scheme will be refocused from April 2022 to support those people with the EVs or looking to buy EVs that live in rented properties and also flat owners. A key initiative that's been positively received by businesses has been the benefit in kind car tax allowance, sorry about that, for company car drivers, which has seen an acceleration in the uptake of electric vehicles, given the savings it offers both employees and employers. And then there's the funding in place to support local authorities and bus operators in England outside of London to switch away from diesel bus fleets, with Welsh Government working on a similar funding scheme for Wales as we speak. And then looking towards the future, the UK has committed around 416 million currently to supporting the development of new technologies to decarbonise our roads, with some of that money, or quite a lot of that money, currently helping to fund demonstrator projects looking at hydrogen and electric powered freight trucks.
Interesting. Before you move on, Jamie, sorry, just if you go back to talk about the issue around the tax.
Do you want me to go back a slide?
Yes, please. Just
let's see if I can do it with this wonderful technology. Look at that.
Yeah, just brilliant. Well done. It's the 1% benefit in kind company car tax allowance for EVs.
Yes.
So is that something that the HMRC would make businesses aware of, or how do businesses go about finding out more about?
So they should be aware of this already. I mean, it came into play in 2020? And basically, it came into play in April 2020. And for the first 2 years, up till 2022, there was a 0% benefit in contact. So what that means, if you're lucky enough to be earning more than on a 40% tax bracket, what that would mean is that if you were getting, say, a car allowance of say £6,000 or £7,000, if you're in a sort of medium-sized company, and what that would mean is that you would be making quite large savings in your tax by moving, rather than taking that car allowance, which is taxed, and actually using that money to procure, actually to lease an electric vehicle. So there's quite large savings for employees as there are for employers. So, for instance, you may use a car allowance to get a far better spec vehicle than potentially you would be if you were using that money to procure or lease your own car. So, there are definite tax advantages for employees in looking at this scheme. And that 1% allowance is in place until I think it's 24-25, but I don't quote me on that. Probably best way to look is to look at HMRC.
Yeah, just before you move on, sorry, I don't want to take you back too much, but you mentioned earlier about the car clubs and the sort of shift towards leasing. Where are we about with that in terms of what's in place? Is it happening extensively?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of councils that have included as part of their kind of net zero plans the idea of introducing car clubs. So you've got several sort of operators in play at the moment, like the likes of Enterprise Car Club, who are working with local authorities to introduce car clubs. And the beauty of car clubs is one of the fact that you just rent a car for when you need it. So in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, you've got people who are basically using a car a couple of times a week to pop to the shops, or potentially they have it on the driveway and they might do a family trip to Snowdonia or something at the weekend. But the point is that there's many instances where a car isn't used that much, potentially in urban scenarios. So this idea of moving away from this idea of ownership to one of rental or leasing is one that could be an attractive solution in the future. And the point of that is, obviously, if you've got 10 people renting one car as opposed to 10 cars in and around, it reduces the volume of traffic on our roads. And it'll work if they can make the usership of this thing easy. So it's easy for you to just book a car, turn up. It'll be the part that it'll either be in a bay, or in the far future it could be you could call up the car and a connected autonomous vehicle drives up to your front door. But the idea being that it's electric, it's accessible, it's easy to get hold of, and then and obviously it reduces cost for yourself as a consumer.
Yeah, of course. Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow there. Just keep going.
Not at all. Absolutely fine. At any point you want to interject, just do so, Kelly.
Yes, you might regret saying that.
Right. So I mentioned just previously about the rapid charging fund, and so I thought I'd concentrate a little more on the plans that Welsh Government have for ensuring there are enough charge points available publicly across Wales to meet the needs of Welsh motorists as they transition to primarily battery electric vehicles. So in April last year, 2021, Welsh Government published their electric vehicle charging strategy for Wales. And then in October, they followed up with an action plan for what they were going to do. You can see the key quotes on the left are what's needed in public space by 2025, namely a network of charge points on the strategic road network every 20 miles across Wales, and also to ensure that one publicly accessible charge point for every 9 electric cars and vans in Wales is available. So as part of this, Transport for Wales, on behalf of the Welsh Government, are undertaking a programme of rolling out super fast or rapid charging points across Wales. So focusing on the areas where private sector alone are unlikely to invest at the moment due to the sort of risk of their assets not being used enough to cover their investment. Sure. And UK-wide charge point operator Swarco, they won a tender last year to install the first 21 charge points at key locations on Wales's main road network, including Cardigan, Welshpool, Newtown, Corwen, and Machynlleth. I think I've said that right. I think I have. I hope I have. Apologies to anyone living in Machynlleth, though I haven't. And I've taken this snapshot from ZapMap, which is a great app, by the way, and amongst other things, displays all live charge point data available on the public network across the UK. And in this case, shows what's live in Wales. And you can see what's already been installed in sort of the purple blobs, with the small blue dots representing what's coming soon. The point of showing this is to reinforce the fact that charging network across Wales is growing, and so allows roaming fleets to traverse the country in confidence, and there are strategic placed chargers to support them. Also, this doesn't take into account any of the future plans that private sector has to install charging infrastructure, including the likes of sort of Shell and BP who have committed plans to deliver rapid charging infrastructure in their forecourts. So that's really, moving on to our next slide. Sorry, my beeper's not working. 2 seconds. There we go. That should work. Oh. I think we've gone one too many, apologies. No. There we go. So we have sort of UK and Welsh Government committed to net zero transport targets and delivering the policy foundations to make this happen. So what about the technology? So meanwhile, the technology needed to deliver zero emission vehicles to market and keep them running has been exploding. So I just wanted to share elements of what's happening in this space for you. So starting with the top left, we're finally seeing vehicle manufacturers embracing battery electric technology, with more and more choice of EVs of all shapes and sizes coming to market. We've got entry-level EVs now below £20,000, which is sort of a critical mark. And later this decade, we'll see a much-needed second-hand market evolving that's clearly critical for the vast majority of UK car owners. Then in terms of home charging, you can order a charge point for your driveway online right now. And currently choose from about 76 different brands out there. So some offering customized design, others offering future-proof functionality that can ensure you can charge directly from any, say, rooftop solar panels that you might have or already or potentially in the future. Then moving across to consider on-street charging, there are tens of manufacturing and installation organisations all looking to support the public sector challenge of offering on-street public charging where car owners park on the road. From charge points being introduced in lampposts to chargers that will rise from pavement level once activated. And this area is probably one that requires the most brain power to solve across the next decade in terms of delivering a cost-effective solution for consumers. Then there's the rise of EV charging forecourts. And we're starting to see now sort of new disruptor organisations like GridServe alongside traditional forecourt operators like Shell, opening dedicated public charging forecourts for EV drivers with work areas, coffee shops, and even gyms to occupy time effectively as your car charges over, say, a 45-minute period. And then sort of looking to more commercial applications, then clearly the technology now exists to manage large fleets with numbers of vehicles all charging at a single site using energy management systems that can schedule charging and deliver exactly the right amount of charge needed per vehicle for its next operational usage.
Can I just
We're also seeing, oh, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, no, sorry. I was just going to ask something.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think I'm just thinking about the likes of Google Maps, for example. When you're en route somewhere, you can find out, where your closest charging station is. Any developments in that area regarding electric vehicle charging?
Yeah, so in terms of being able to pinpoint where charges are on a sort of on your sat nav.
Yeah, en route. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know the state of. I mean, as I mentioned, there was an app that I use religiously called ZapMap.
You mentioned that earlier,
which
sorry.
I mentioned before. And the thing about ZapMap that's really interesting is that it's actually, whilst it's a private organisation, the information insight's actually powered by its community of drivers and users. Right. So one of the things previously has been one around, I suppose, reliance or reliability of charge points. So you might be expecting to drive to somewhere in the Outer Hebrides. No offense to anyone who might have charging out the Outer Hebrides, but you're going to somewhere quite remote that you're reliant on a charge point working. And to date, it's been quite difficult to understand, to know whether that charge point was working or not. So using an app like ZapMap allows you to give an indication historically of when that charge point was utilised, and with people being quite proactive to say, I visited this place and the charge point was in perfect working order, or I visited this place and the charge point wasn't in working order. Now, there's been a lot of work done to make the network far more reliable than potentially it used to be. But there are, in terms of, I've got an EV and it shows me where charge points are. It hasn't got ZapMap in it, but it does show. So I'm not 100% certain as to what's happening between car manufacturers and sort of technology providers in this space, but one would assume that it's just around the corner, if not already. So apologies. I mean, I've got a relatively old EV that doesn't have that tech on. It could be that the ones that are rolling off the shelves now have that functionality with them in terms of the software on the dashboard. So I mean, if it's not there, it very much should be very soon. But I'm pretty much sure that if you buy an EV now, then it'll have that technology on board.
Thank you.
Not at all. Right. So, and then finally, I suppose on this side, we're also seeing electric and hydrogen powered buses more frequently on our roads. And what started as sort of EU funded projects are now turning into operational reality as bus operators and local authorities drive to decarbonise public transport by the end of this decade. And what you might be able to see in this very tiny image, but and it's probably slightly obscured by the writing on top, but is an example of a pantograph charging that can be deployed to allow buses to gain sort of quick opportunistic charge while they're in service during the day. So there's plenty of technology that's already in play. But what about technology that is just around the corner? It says pressing the button. Yes, there we go. So what technology advance are we looking at? So firstly, I suppose, and what's of key importance will be the progression of battery technology. So this is about getting more miles from your electrons without having to increase battery size. And whilst the tile on screen shows 500 plus miles, actually 2 recent pieces of news have seen prototype batteries in vehicles go 600 miles on a single charge and more, which should actually quieten down anyone who's still got sort of rage anxiety about EVs. And then we have the rise of bidirectional charging or vehicle to grid. So this is a service that's still in its operational infancy, but will become more prolific as we move through the 2020s. In essence, it's the ability to have an electricity flow between your EV battery and either the grid, if that's where the power is needed, or even in your own home. Moving to the middle column, for the 500,000 HGVs on our road, the technology needed to transform to zero emissions is still very much being trialled and tested, with vehicle manufacturers considering both battery electric and hydrogen powered prototypes alongside the kind of large scale infrastructure needed to keep them on the roads. So the battery packs needed, for instance, to power 44 tons of maxed out 6-axle articulated lorry will be absolutely huge. So hydrogen fueled options could offer an alternative that would allow for refueling within 10 minutes and potentially provide more overall power and range. So other related technologies being trialled include wireless EV charging for applications such as taxi ranks, and this is currently being trialled in both Copenhagen but also in Nottingham. And then further afield, there's the potential for connected autonomous vehicles, which we mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking car clubs, to be prevalent on our roads and could be a key ingredient for reducing the volume of vehicles on roads, as well as improving safety. However, it's worth noting that forecasts predict that this technology won't sort of really gain momentum until the end of the decade. So with all this as an important foundation backdrop, we can suppose now turn to how this affects you all as fleet owners and what your journey might look like. I don't know if there's any other questions at this point, Kelly, or shall I just crack on?
No, I was just in terms of the 500 miles certainly seems to dispel some myths around range. So presumably a new car would offer that kind of range. You talked a little bit about the sort of second-hand market. Where would we stand with that? So let's say if we were to invest in a three-year-old car or a 3-year-old van, what sort of range would we be looking at there?
I suppose if you're looking at vans now, so you're looking at a van. So I mean, I talk about it a bit later on, but there's a new Renault Kangoo, which is a very popular van, there's an E version coming out, or a new E-Tech version, an electric van version coming out in the spring, and that's looking at doing a real world range of about 186 miles, and it's got a 45 kilowatt battery in it. We'll talk a bit later on. We'll talk about the sort of the specifics around sort of kilowatt hours and battery ranges, etc. But I think that if you're looking on average, a vehicle that you buy today is going to have probably about anything between a 40 and sort of 90, but probably on average about a 60 kilowatt battery. So you're looking at getting just sort of in the mid 250 miles worth of range out of it.
Okay.
And so in 3 years' time, that's the kind of vehicle that you'll be getting secondhand. And whereas now the vehicle you'll be getting you're getting probably not so much Tesla 3s yet, but Tesla S's, which are very expensive. But as sort of Tesla 3s sort of hit the second-hand car market, you'll be getting not far off 300 miles range off that, if not more, depending on the different model that you get.
Great. Now that's really helpful, because there are lots of myths around which technologies to go for and the charge and the range. Even I was talking to a second-hand car dealer at the weekend actually, and he had some myths which I was quite confidently able to dispel. is good. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, not at all. The other thing that's worth noting is that, I know probably many people already know this, but the average mileage that a UK driver does on a daily basis is under 30. So that was one of the things we always talk about when you're dispelling sort of range anxiety, was that the vast majority of people don't do anything like that kind of range. It's only when
Right.
you take the 1 to 2 journeys a year where you're going on holiday or going to see far-flung family that potentially that has an issue. But that's, again, I mean, you're looking at, Wales is a pretty rural country. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to have range anxiety, then potentially Wales is the country where you're going to have it. Right. So moving on. So before we continue, we want to look at sort of clean vehicles and the infrastructure options, but I just wanted to share this quote that I first heard sort of 3 years ago from the commercial director of Royal Mail. He was speaking at the sort of Fleet Mobility Conference, and he was talking about the journey they started on to decarbonise the first 3,000 of their 40,000 strong van fleet. So in his comment was simple, that fleet managers or owners now need to be energy managers, because we're moving from an established world of litres of petrol to a new world of kilowatt hours of electrons. And so there's lots to consider. So I've talked already about the technology that's being introduced, but I thought this slide maps out well the different vehicle types, the volumes in Wales that might need to transition, the clean vehicle solutions that likely these vehicle types will move towards, the suspected battery size of each technology, and then where charging and refueling could actually take place. So starting with cars and light commercial vehicles or vans, the overwhelming clean vehicle solution is going to be battery electric. Currently, van technology is a little behind cars, but it's catching up rapidly. And there may be a call for some hydrogen-powered fuel cell electric cars and vans where quick-fire refueling is essential. And this is because with hydrogen, you can pretty much fill in the same timescale as you can with petrol. So the battery sizes in these battery electric vehicles will range from sort of 40 kilowatt hours to 100 kilowatt hour size, giving ranges from 150 miles to 300 miles plus as technology progresses. And obviously, talking about that technology earlier, squeezing more electrons out of your or battery power out of your battery, then in the not too distant future, probably 2025, we're going to start seeing longer ranges with the same kind of battery size. So charging for, I suppose, 65% of UK car owners who have off-street parking will mostly take place at home. And this is where, on average, 70 to 80% of all charging requirements will happen. And for the rest of UK car owners who don't have access to off-street parking, it'll be a mix of on-street options, charging forecourts, and destination charging options, which I'll explain a little more in a couple of slides' time. Then for light commercial van drivers, charging will most likely take place at the depot if that's the operational preference, or at home if the organisation currently expects drivers to take their vans home with them. And this clearly applies to independent tradespeople as well. And then we also have the challenge again of on-street parking or on-street charging if vans are usually parked on the road overnight as opposed to a driveway. Then as vehicles become bigger and you move into sort of medium size and HGVs, they become heavier and more energy intensive, so the battery sizes and the power requirements to charge them increase. And then the consideration then needs to turn to whether hydrogen fuel rather than plug-in electric might be more operationally viable. In many cases, the thinking is that battery electric will do the trick, but there are definitely plenty of user cases where battery electric solutions might not stack up. And this is hence why sort of UK government is investing in demonstrator projects to trial different technology stacks. But what's clear from this slide, I think, is that the bigger and the more specialist the vehicle, the longer the time frame it will take to transition to an ultra-low emissions alternative. So I hope that slide's a useful one.
Definitely.
Moving on, what I thought I'd do here was sort of sticking with the vehicles. I thought it'd be useful to look at a very simple and sort of basic cost comparison between a new Renault Kangoo E-Tech all-electric van, which is what I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's coming to market this spring, and its diesel equivalent. So what you can see straight away is the vehicle price difference between the technologies, which is substantial. This came from an online and dealer quote, so as fleet owners, you can probably command a much better deal. But what's clear is that new tech is more expensive to buy. The UK government's plug-in grant gives a little helping hand, as does the waive in road tax. Maintenance is estimated to be less, given that the e-van has probably around 85% less moving parts than its diesel equivalent. But it's at the fuel level where cost savings start to be clawed back against the diesel model. Now, very much appreciate that currently fuel and energy prices are at the volatile high levels. So I've used the new average kind of domestic price cap that's coming out from the 1st of April of 28 pence per kilowatt hour. And I've used a £1.50 per litre of diesel cost for this purposes. So in sort of pre-crazy gas price times, the cost ratio between diesel and electricity per mile was probably 3 times as much for diesel versus electric, or probably about 12p per mile to diesel versus 4p per mile for electric. So if those prices had stayed stable as they'd done for like the previous 3 years or so, then the delta that you see at the bottom of this screen, the sort of total cost, would be different and would be around 3, with the e-van costing probably about £3,500 dearer. But then when you analyse for this yourselves, though, it's really important that you'd want to add in insurance costs and a residual value for your vehicle. But what is clear from this slide, though, is that the fuel savings that were a key benefit for buyers are being eroded due to the high energy prices. But this should be offset by reducing prices for EVs over time. And obviously, one would hope that the energy price, the energy market started to settle down probably next year.
So you do envisage the cost of vehicles might reduce over time. That was one of my questions, actually. That's interesting that you made a comment about that.
Yeah, I think I mean it's the same with all technologies, isn't it? It's the once you mass market, you'll have competitive. You've got pretty much every single OEM now vying for market share in the electric vehicle market space. There'll be different options for different price levels as you get today. It's just you're going it'll be different, but it's what you're talking about is a whole new world of electric vehicles rather than internal combustion engine vehicles. And to begin with, they're going to, as technology takes, it's going to be a little pricier, I suspect. But as I said, you're going to see, a burgeoning second-hand car market, which is going to be really, really important over time. And obviously, the cost of vehicles as the manufacturing process becomes slicker and cost of parts hopefully becomes less, then you'll see that the cost of vehicles will come down. They already are.
They are, of course. So you might be covering this later in your discussion, but what about battery replacement? So how long do batteries last? I mean, if some people buy cars new or vehicles new and run them to the ground, others have them on a sort of scheduled replacement. So
yeah,
what is it? Is it something that something to factor in? Sorry if you're covering this a bit later on.
No. I mean, it's an interesting one. So there are some sort of trials and schemes in sort of over in Asia, mainly around battery replacement. If you were to buy a Nissan Leaf, or if you get the car manufacturers will give you a warranty on the batteries. So interesting that the Renault Kangoo has a warranty on the battery. So that's just a plain warranty. If anything goes wrong with the battery, it gets swapped out for 60,000 miles. Or 5 years, after which you're kind of on your own if something happens. In terms of battery erosion, it will erode over time, but I mean, you're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of miles, which you're not likely to get out of your internal combustion engine. So we are talking about a brand new market here, and there is uncertainty around sort of residual cost of vehicles. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a car manufacturing specialist, but I think the other thing is there's obviously opportunities for second life of batteries. So people saying that what's going to happen to these batteries when they're finished. The idea potentially is that the volume of batteries could be used to sort of as battery storage in homes, as an example. So there is thinking going in, and also there's in Germany already there is a sort of a battery recycling centre, and I would suspect that those will sort of come to prominence in years to come as we look to recycle the components that sit within a lithium-ion battery.
Great, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that.
That's all right. Let's see if technology works again. 2 seconds, sorry. There we go. And action. There we go. So appreciate this is a busy slide, but we've run through the high-level clean vehicle options. Now, sort of what I wanted to do is what about the infrastructure that keeps all these vehicles on the road? What I've tried to do here is to map out the whole of the EV charging ecosphere. The top line shows the speed of charging via different available charger types, starting from 2.3 kilowatt hours, which what you get from a domestic 3-pin plug and socket, all the way through to sort of ultra rapid 500 kilowatt DC charging options that are starting to come into play in the public arena and very much needed in strategic locations across the UK for those large battery electric freight lorries as they come into operation in probably the late 2020s and into the 30s. You then have a line that shows the average time it would take for a car with an average size battery of sort of 64 kilowatt hours to charge. In this case, I've just used a Kia e-Niro. And just for note, also the green blob I've put in the right shows that what sort of 1 kilowatt hour of charge should give an EV if driven at kind of normal speeds in a real world mileage scenario. So basically you're talking about 1 kilowatt hour of charge will give you 3.5 miles. Then I've listed out the different charging options or scenarios, and underneath that, the average cost to install a charge point plus any known grants available to support installation. So I just thought I'd start with a sort of at-home, off-street. So as mentioned before, about 65% of UK car owners will be predominantly charging their EVs on their driveway, and they'll be using, in the main, a 7 kilowatt charger that's installed on the side of their house. So you can get a 3.6 kilowatt version should circumstances mean you need this, but the norm is definitely for having a 7 kilowatt version. Drivers should be able to take advantage of off-peak tariffs that allow them to charge predominantly in the middle of the night for a much lower fee, sort of say between 4 and 8p per kilowatt hour, making it even more economical in terms of pence per mile savings. There are currently around 5 tariffs on the market, but obviously with the current energy price crisis happening, getting on a tariff now might be difficult and potentially uneconomical. Actually could be more expensive than if you're on the price cap at the moment. The standard cost for installing a home charge point is around £900, but at the moment, until the end of March, which clearly isn't that far away, you can take advantage of the £350 home charge grant, which is still available. But from the 1st of April, the focus for this grant is going to shift to tenants in rented properties and flat owners. Then turning to on-street charging, if consumers don't have off-street parking access and have to park on the street, then they're going to have to interact with their local authority to try and get charging infrastructure installed in their neighbourhood. And the options could include the 5.5 kilowatt chargers that fit into existing lampposts, or a 7 kilowatt charge point either installed on curbside posts or ones that are built into the ground and rise up from the pavement when needing, which I kind of mentioned earlier. As you can see, the cost of installing these is far higher and needs to be covered by local authority. There is a government grant to support this, however, called the On-Street Residential Charging Scheme, or ORCS, which offers 75% of funding costs to local authorities. And finding a charge when you park on the street definitely remains a challenge, though, which is why drivers will probably seek alternatives in these early days to meet their needs, such as through destination charging options, which I'll cover in a minute. And just as a sort of a benchmark, public charging costs range from about 23 pence per kilowatt hour, but I'd expect this to climb as impact of energy prices take hold, so potentially much more. But actually, what's important is that it's potentially much more than if you were able to charge at home. So moving from home to a commercial setting, both private and public sector entities have started to install charging infrastructure at work car parks to help encourage and support employees to transition to EVs. Predominantly, again, these will be 7 kilowatt charge points, but if the site has 3-phase electricity supply, which is important if you want, which is absolutely vital, if you want to install 22 kilowatt chargers, which offer a higher charging speed if there's enough available electricity capacity to do so. If there isn't, then charging systems can revert back to charging at lower speeds that meet with any capacity constraints to ensure that there's never any electrical system failure. So you may see sort of at the top that the charging speed of the Kia Niro, there's only a 2-hour difference between charging at 7 kilowatts and 22 kilowatts. And the reason for this is that currently very few cars on the market in the UK have the functionality to charge at 22 kilowatts AC. And then again, when we look at commercial fleet charging, then charging options pretty much cover the whole ecosphere, with fleet owners looking at home charge solutions for their drivers as probably the most cost-effective solution, all the way through to a range of different charging systems and speeds at depot to meet the fleet's needs. 7 kilowatt charging will probably be enough for overnight charging, dependent on battery size. But if the site does have three-phase electric supply, then again, I'd consider installing 22 kilowatt chargers, as the price differential between the two, the 7 kilowatt and 22 kilowatts, the actual chargers, is minimal, and you're adding that future-proofed option of quicker charging. You'll also notice the hike in price from a domestic install, so the £4,000 mark is a guideline, but this cost could include the installation of a double socket charge point, which means you can charge two vehicles at the same time, so kind of two for the price of one. Also in commercial fleet settings, you'll start to see the potential inclusion of DC rapid charging options, where vehicles need quick boosts during the day or night to ensure operational continuity. As you can see, the cost of DC charging starts to get much more investment heavy with units themselves without installation, starting from around £20,000 a unit. Next down the list is destination charging, which looks at charging points installed at places that you just might want to go to. So like supermarkets, restaurants, attractions, gyms, etc. And options start at a sort of a 7 kilowatts, so if you wanted a bit of a charge while you were shopping, but there are definite, clear and looks like quite very successful business models with organizations out there focusing on specific charging requirements and installing quick charge rapid units at supermarkets and fast food restaurants. So the idea that'll fill your car with electrons in 45 minutes when you go and grab a burger or do a weekly shop. Finally, then there's en route charging, which is really important. This is important for your fleet your roaming fleets as it is for consumers wanting to get about the country. These will be rapid to cater for user needs, looking to minimize charge time as much as possible, but also looking to offer value add services while you wait. So again, coffee shops, food, work areas, etc. And the price per kilowatt hour probably starts at around 30p per kilowatt hour here, and can rise past 50p for some networks. There are currently around 5,500 rapid and ultra rapid charge points in the UK, all installed by private sector looking to find those prime locations that will reap future profits as utilisation expands. And this is a fast growing market with UK government responding to the issues that have been found around future power availability on the strategic road network, using that rapid charging fund to deliver the necessary kind of, I suppose, structural foundations, electrical network foundations to be able to support the installation of thousands of new charge points across the strategic road network. So I thought that was a useful, hopefully a useful view as to sort of the ecosphere of charging infrastructure that's available to everybody.
Ryan, sorry, if you're about to move on, Jamie, just going back.
I am.
I'm waiting now until the end of the slide.
No, the end of the slide is done. I'm juggling with technology.
Okay. So the on-street charging infrastructure, you mentioned earlier that local authorities are basically leading on this sort of program. Is there a program of delivery, or is there sort of a ramping up process in place? Do you know? So for
Yes.
example, if I was as a resident, sorry, yeah, you carry on.
No, there is. I mean, we know that. So pretty much every single local authority in Wales is looking at how they're going to roll out the kind of infrastructure needed. So I know that Cardiff have been looking at the kind of volumes of charge points they need to put in around the region to meet the growing need, the growing requirement of EV drivers. Obviously, there's a lot of on-street parking in Cardiff, so they're currently looking at what the kind of volumes they need to install. And I think it's, if you look down the street, I always do this, I'm a bit of a geek on this, but I'll always look down the street going, where would I put charging infrastructure to support this street? And in many cases, you're only talking about sort of, you might have 60 cars on a street and 8 lampposts. And you suddenly think, well, you can't put a lamp, what are you going to do? So it is a massive challenge. And I think that there's all sorts of solutions that might happen. So for instance, looking at, sort of designated EV sort of hubs built, sort of car parks built for specific roads, but it's going to be a logistical or an infrastructure nightmare to trying to work out where you're going to put these so that you've got within a 5-minute walk of your house. The other potential is that you end up having this kind of just as today you go to a petrol station to fill your car up. You do that on a regular basis, but you know that you're not going to spend 5 to 10 minutes. You're more likely to spend half an hour, and then you start to use the network. So, for instance, if I'm going to go shopping and there's a charge point there, I'll use that, and that'll just get a top up there. I'll go to the forecourt. But in an ideal world, what you want is to be able to have something relatively close to your home that you can plug into. And I mean that's where if you've got a driveway, you're your problem solved. If you haven't got a driveway, you're reliant on a different kind of model to be able to deliver you a sort of charge points that you can utilize. Absolutely. So it's definitely a challenge. Yeah, I mean it's a challenge that everyone's. Sorry.
No, all I was going to say was it's a chicken and egg situation for some individuals that want to make the transition, isn't it? So individuals or even businesses, even if you see vehicles that are charging at home, even if they
absolutely
business vehicles.
Yeah, and I think the more that businesses, if they're in a situation, for instance, we talk about this a bit later, but if you're in a situation where you're a business and you're currently reliant on your drivers taking their vehicles home, and some of them have driveways, fair enough, but some of them don't, then I would implore them, people to talk to local authorities to understand how you can collaboratively work together to try and find a solution, because it's happening all across the UK.
Of course. Great, thank you.
Not at all. Right. So now we move into the sort of final part, the nitty gritty, and sort of developing your fleet transition plan. So we've covered the policy foundations that government are putting in place to deliver decarbonised transport. We've talked about the technology. We've talked about vehicle choices and charging infrastructure. So how do we then put all this together to deliver a plan for transitioning your fleet? So here I've broken down what we believe you need to consider that and what should be incorporated into your plan of thinking around future transitioning. And there are sort of 3 primary elements to this. The first place to start is around the analysis of your current fleet and what clean vehicle options you could transition to. So the key areas to consider here are sort of the miles done by each vehicle in a day or a night. If you have a fleet of light commercial vans doing a maximum of 80 miles in any given day, then battery electric technology is readily available to allow you to transition now. But say if you're using larger, medium-sized commercial vehicles that are clocking up on average 200 miles a day across Wales with no predictive routes that would allow you for targeted charging stops, then you may think the technology isn't quite ready for me to switch operations yet. Road usage versus off-road usage, another consideration, or vehicle technology, as is the current availability of battery electric vehicles given global issues with semiconductor supply and the potential long time waits on popular new EVan models. So these factors are critical inputs to working out whether there's a clean vehicle solution that's out there already for you at an economically viable cost, or if not, when there will be. Another element to think at this stage is around leasing if you don't already do this. So given the technology advances happening, you may want to consider a fixed term lease rather than outright purchase as technology kind of advances and becomes more mainstream. The next stage of the plan is to consider what infrastructure you're going to need to keep your fleet in operation. So if you have drivers currently taking vehicles home, could they charge an EV where they live? And if not, what could be the options that might be the changes to current that might mean there are sort of changes to current operational processes? Alternatively, if your commercial vehicles park up at your work depot, what kind of charging infrastructure would you need at site? For example, if you've got 4 vans doing 50 miles a day that park up at night, you'll probably want 7 kilowatt charge points in your depot, but you won't need 4 charge points. You probably maybe just need 2, and then you alternate the charging on a day-by-day basis. Also vital to depot charging infrastructure planning will be around gaining permission from the site owner if you don't own the site. This is vitally important. Another key consideration at this stage, if you have multiple vehicles parking up at depot, is how much spare power capacity you have on your site that can be used for charging your vehicles. Also, if you don't already know, then finding out if your premises have 1 or 3-phase supply will be important, as they'll give you the option for considering the 7 or 22 kilowatt chargers. You should be able to find all this out from your energy supplier or your energy broker consultant if you use one. Knowing about capacity is important, really important, as it may have an impact on the volume of charge points you can install before you need to consider additional measures that can give you the power you need to charge your fleet. This might be as simple as including a load management system or a balancing mechanism as part of your charging solution, which can then manage and balance the load or schedule charging across your chargers, so you never blow the electrical system. Or it might get more complicated, and it could require application for a network upgrade via your district network operator to provide you with more capacity for future charging needs. And then there's the charging technology to think about. We've already mentioned 7 and 22 kilowatt chargers, but an important element is the back office software package that you'll need that allows you to manage and monitor charging, as well as all sorts of other functionality options, such as payment services should you ever want to use charge for usage. And with vehicle options and costs analysed and charging options considered, the last element of the plan is to look at the economics and the potential funding options. This may be difficult to do in advance of any market interaction if you found out you're going to need more power capacity, but if not, using the average rule of thumb I provided on charge point costs in the previous slide should suffice. So with an idea of total cost, you may also want to consider how best to fund any transition. For example, what national and potentially local grants are available. Also, you may want to research leasing options to help ease capex, or maybe look at any first-year capital allowance savings you could make through purchase of charging equipment. It's also important to ask the question, how can I future-proof what I need? For example, there are different open and closed charging system solutions in the market. And by closed, I mean solutions where a brand's hardware and software won't connect with other brands. So this may be fine for what you need, but it means it may be more difficult in future to add any other charge points other than the brand you have, or to swap to a different software solution that can connect to all of your charge points. Finally, it's also worth sharing your thinking about around the local business community. Collaboration is becoming more and more commonplace in this space, with options to potentially share charging infrastructure and maximize utilization. So for instance, if you're on a business park and your vehicles are out of depot between sort of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And they park up at night, but you're next to a commercial office where employees are doing a 9-to-5 desk job, is there an opportunity to rent out your charging assets to suit your neighbour's workplace charging needs? It's a thought that's worth considering. So that's really the plan side of things. Yes. So in this final couple of slides, I just wanted to take you through what I think is a sort of an end-to-end procurement and installation process around installing charging infrastructure. So as a fleet owner, you have a little background insight as and when you want to manage and engage the market. So I'm assuming here that there's already an initial plan in place. And in this scenario, let's say we're a customer looking at 10 new all-electric vans to replace, say, 50% of our current commercial fleet. Plus, we've also got 5 sales staff to transition to EV in next year's lease cycle of their company cars. So the analysis we've put together proposes that we need an initial 6 times or 7 kilowatt charge points at our depot as our vans park overnight at site, plus say we need another 5-7 kilowatt charge points at homes of employees as they switch to EVs because they've all got driveways. We're also looking for a back office solution that can offer payment services and is connected to wider public charging networks that's going to ease our employees' needs to charge when they're out roaming. So this is our initial approach, proposal. What we do next is we're going to engage the market and we're going to try and seek 3 supplier quotes. One, we're going to try and get one from a national charge point operator who offers a whole end-to-end system solution. We're going to look for one from a technology agnostic EV installer who can install several different brands of hardware and software. And we're going to get one from our current energy consultancy who's also offering this service. The reason for doing this is it gives us some variety of options and cost as a starter for 10. Now, in this scenario, the first thing that each supplier will do is they'll undertake a site survey, either remotely, but most likely given the scenario we've just mentioned, they'll do a physical visit. And in this particular scenario, the suppliers have all done a physical visit, and they've come back to say that our site currently has enough available power capacity just for 4 7-kilowatt charge points, so definitely less than we need. So what are our options? So all the suppliers we spoke to can offer a load management system that should allow us to meet our current charging requirements without blowing the system. Or we could potentially seek a different charging configuration, but that was going to impact on our operations. Or we could apply for a capacity increase through our district network operator, given our overall aim is obviously going to be having double the charging facilities for the rest of our fleet when we switch those over to electric as well. So working with our energy consultancy, we're going to apply to the DNO to deliver as a quote for a network upgrade based on the capacity need. This could take but it's worth noting that this could take a number of weeks to happen or to be provided. But at the same time, we could approach an energy system specialist as well to spec out an alternative solution, which could include developing rooftop solar generation on a property and battery storage as a way to delivering more power to the site. So we've all got the options have all come back to the table, and the one that seems the most sense to us in this particular scenario is to invest in the network upgrade, so that with those costs in hand, we can then scrutinize the supplier options. So looking at the hardware options, looking at what software goes against it, the delivery timelines, the operational capabilities of each supplier, and most importantly, actually, well, not most importantly, but one of the important factors is that end user experience. So utilizing the software, and if there's an app that users have to use, making sure that that's user friendly, and evaluating all this alongside costs. We've also had, or the scenario allows you also to look at those DNO costs, and at any given point you can challenge those costs. And one thing that's worth noting in this scenario is that Ofgem, who are the energy market regulator, is currently undertaking a consultation looking at network upgrade costs. So actually, it could be worth waiting for this consultation to complete, which is probably going to be the latter end of this year, and probably start getting rolled out, whatever results rolled out next year, before you press any go buttons in this space, because it could be that there could be some savings to be had. So once we've worked out the economics and how best to finance, we then choose and procure the option that's most economically and technologically viable for the future. The next stage, he says, pressing the button, yes, is for the civil works to take place via the DNO. So the DNO will then take the works that happen off-site potentially to make sure that you've got enough capacity for your chosen solution. And once that's complete, then the chosen supplier is going to undertake all of the installation-related works on site. This may include the need to sort of dig trenches, to lay cables between the distribution board and where the charge points are, as well as cementing posts, installing charge points and electrical connections. In this scenario, we've chosen to undertake additional trench and cable laying work with our supplier, so we're ready for phase 2 of our future installation. So when we electrify the rest of our vans. So this is going to save us on time and costs in the future with this kind of dig once approach. In addition, our suppliers also going to install those home charge points as advised when our sales staff transition to EV company cars. So with charge points in, connections tested, the supplier then will hand over installation to us. And within a couple of days, we're also connected to our back office software solution, and we're ready to take a delivery of our electric vans. Through the back office, we can report on energy cost and consumption per vehicle and charge point. We can evaluate how much carbon emissions we're saved versus diesel equivalent. And we can also see the status of each charge point and receive alerts if something comes up. In this scenario, also, our supplier is also the charge point operator, and they will actively manage our charge point live status and remotely reset in case of any issues. And those issues, potentially the most common ones, probably that we've got a cable locked in a vehicle, and that can be done remotely, and they just release that through the software. And then in terms of ongoing operations and maintenance, so what we've done in this scenario is we've agreed an extended warranty in place on our charge points. So all charge points normally come with a 3-year warranty. What we've done is we paid a little extra to make that 5-year warranty. We've got payment services in place should our policy be that we're going to charge our employees for plugging in their own vehicles during the day, or potentially if we widen usage to other parties when our vans are out of the depot. And this service, it's important to note, this service would carry a fee, which should be agreed with the supplier ahead of contract signature. So it could be like 1 pence per kilowatt hour. So you need to factor this into any price level you intend to charge for usage. Finally, we've also agreed a maintenance package with our supplier, which includes a yearly check to clean out spiders and make sure the charger is working optimally. And also we've got a 2-day service level agreement in place if one of our charge points ever needed replacing due to a fault that couldn't be fixed remotely. So that just hopefully gives you an idea for the end-to-end process that happens if you're looking to install charge points. So I thought that was useful. So we've pretty much covered a fair amount over the last 45 minutes or so. I was just going to, before, if you've got any more questions, Kelly, I was just going to quickly just run through what I think are sort of a few key takeaways, which on this last slide. So firstly, if you don't have the right insight yet around this subject, and there's a lot to learn, then please take the opportunity to research. There is tons of content out there for fleet owners, and I'd probably advise starting with the Energy Savings Trust website as a good place to start. And then secondly, I think it's important that you build an indicative plan of what you want to do based on how your fleet operates today and what's achievable when. So for instance, if you operate a single articulated lorry, then the plan may be to park your thinking on this until later in the decade when technology is more advanced. Next takeaway is around power availability. As I mentioned earlier, it's critically important if you're looking at transitioning a number of vehicles at a depot location. It's been a key challenge for some of the UK's largest fleet operators to date, so definitely worth bearing in mind. So when you've got an indicative plan and you're ready to engage the market, make sure you get a range of charge point operator and installer views on solutions and costs so you compare and contrast. My experiences to date have shown that there can be significant differences in solution and cost between the different suppliers. Finally, and I've mentioned this a few times already, always look wherever you can, look to future-proof your solution, whether that be in your vehicle or infrastructure choices. So having solutions that are ready for the next tech rollout, such as potentially bi-directional charging, or that can easily integrate with other tech, such as battery storage, just gives you that flexibility for what might happen next. So I think that's pretty much it, Kelly, from my perspective. My throat is sore, so I think I've done enough talking.
That's great. The key takeaways actually have answered quite a few of my questions. You'll probably be pleased to hear. Thanks ever so much for that absolutely comprehensive, well, for want of a better description, walkthrough of, you know, sort of where we start and where we'll end up. So that's certainly been very insightful. I'm sure it's answered quite a lot of questions. It's a lot to take in. One can feel slightly overwhelmed with all these changes, and we can imagine in 10 years, you know, sort of mobility is going to look very, very different indeed. What an exciting change. What we'd like to promote at this point is that Jamie is going to be running some surgery sessions. So if anybody wants any one-to-one support, any businesses out there that want one-to-one support on, you know, where to go next, or to think a bit more in detail about their plans, how to formulate a plan, Jamie is going to be running sessions at the end of March and April. The dates will be available on Event Finder where you booked for this session. So please feel free to follow that up. We're also going to be producing some resources that we will be forwarding on to businesses who have attended this session. So thank you very much indeed for joining. It's been a pleasure to have you with us, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Sian.
I should also say that just at the end of the session now, we do have an opportunity for question and answers. So feel free to, you know, wait on, stay on and ask as many questions as you like. If we're not able to answer them today, you know, we can follow those up. And also, you know, if you've got any comments, any requests for specific types of information, just feel free to use that as an opportunity to do that. And Business Wales will do its very best to facilitate those questions and those requests. Many thanks again.
Diolch yn fawr, Kelly, a diolch yn fawr, Jamie. Thank you very much. Yes, so just picking up on what Kelly said there. So Jamie's going to be hosting the Costain Low Emission Vehicle Surgery sessions, where you can book a one-to-one session on the 29th of April and the 6th of May. So if you would like to arrange one of those sessions, they're one-to-one, about an hour long. You need to go to businesswales.gov.wales/green ambition. The link is in the chat for you, and people have been booking already. So I would recommend that you book those as soon as possible. Okay, so we're going to go back now to Kelly and Jamie for our question and answer session. Hello, croeso nôl. The car clubs you were mentioning, Jamie, I have to say I only found out about them via Suits, the series where Harvey, one of the lead actors, is rather gorgeous, has an amazing car club, which I think must cost an absolute fortune because he has Porsches and Ferraris. But I think you weren't referring to those kind of car clubs. Why not? Okay, so the first question we have that's come in has come from Andy Wilkins, saying, do you anticipate that the rapid hire capacity charges will decrease in price in the future, either through grants or increased supply on the market? Okay, so we can't actually hear Jamie at the moment. We can hear someone's dog. I'm not sure. Jamie, can you hear me? If you refresh maybe your screen, that sometimes helps. Still not hearing you at the moment, Jamie. Oh, okay. We're going to wait. I think we're going to wait for Jamie and me to log back in and log back out again. I was just while we're waiting, I don't know if you know about this. It's a company in France, Kelly, called Blah Blah Car, and because the railway system, I hope there's nobody French here, is rubbish, and the bus transport system is absolutely awful. But you can actually, so if I'm going to go if I want to book to go from Paris down to Toulouse or whatever, people who are just driving will say, I'm going from Paris to Toulouse, and then you actually car share. And it's a national system, and it's so effective and really cheap. Such a good idea. And people have said to me, oh, why don't you set it up in Wales? As we all know, setting up a business is not easy, but it's a fabulous idea. Jamie, are you back with us?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can.
Yay.
We can.
Yes, apologies. I don't know what happened there. I think I ran out of batteries.
Okay.
So the question was, are we expecting the cost of rapid charging units to come down?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is an organisation that's looking to install them in their premises. So at the moment, you're talking about an actual rapid charging unit of approximately sort of £20,000 ish, maybe a little bit more depending on the speed of the unit. The actual sort of quite a lot of the cost can come into the installation side of things, where you're looking at putting some reinforced sort of connectivity in order to get that thing to charge as it should do. Now, Ofgem, who are the sort of the regulator looking after the energy industry, are currently they're undertaking a piece of consultation looking at the costs for district network operators who are actually putting in the increased connectivity that allow you to put this kind of charge point in place. And at the moment, it's down to the end user to pay for this. And there's a consultation happening at the moment to understand if that's fair or not. So it could be that the cost of installing these charge points does go down. And I don't think that consultation is due to sort of complete and be made public and with next steps and actions, etc., until sort of probably 2023. So my advice is to probably wait and see what happens on that front. But actually, yeah, obviously, the more rapid charging units that are manufactured, clearly the cost is going to come down, and there'll be more and more manufacturers out there who are developing this kind of kit, whether they be so one of the leading manufacturers is Australian, or it might be in sort of ABB, sort of who are based in Europe, and obviously in the States as well, and as one would expect the Chinese do as well. So there's plenty of different manufacturing options. Said that they're likely to come down, clearly likely to come down as volumes go up.
Andrew is also saying, is there maybe going to be grants available for it? He said increased supply in the market, as you've just covered, but do you think there'll be grants available?
At the moment, there are. So it depends on the situation. So if you are if you're a private sector organisation, you've got something called the workplace charging scheme, which is not particularly helpful if you're going to put in a rapid charging unit because they're much more expensive. So at the moment, there's nothing in place. I don't want to preempt what government are going to do. I mean, they are putting in grant structures, as I mentioned in my presentation, sort of rapid charging fund, etc., to support the installation of rapid charging units around the strategic road network. There's nothing that I'm aware of currently that supports the private sector in installing rapid charging units.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for the question, Andy. Kieran is also asking, so in relation to charge points, how long are you looking roughly for a charge at a quick charge, which I think is I hope I'm right, Kieran, with this. How long does it take to charge a vehicle at a quick charge point?
So I think what we're saying here is it's a rapid charge point, and it depends on what you turn up at. There's lots of different factors, unfortunately, Kieran, where this is. But if you were to turn up at a charge point, a rapid charge point that was had a 50 kilowatt capacity or 50 kilowatt hour capacity, and you had your vehicle was, say, it had sort of 20% charge, and you plugged yourself in, you're probably looking at sort of a 45-minute charge in order to get what you need to get going. So it really depends on whether no one goes from empty to full in EVs unless something's drastically gone wrong. And also the other thing is that different manufacturers are sort of vehicles. They have different charging speeds, interestingly. So you could charge in you can plug in an Audi and it will charge at a sort of a potentially a different speed than say a Kia. So there are different nuances between different manufacturers, but on average that's probably what you're looking at.
Lovely, thank you very much, and thank you, Kieran, again for the question. From Gary, what are the plans for any of these used elements to be then recycled after their date of expiry?
Okay, so if we're talking about the battery themselves, then there is some work. So I don't know if I mentioned, but in Germany, the VW have a sort of a processing plant where they're starting to look at recycling the batteries themselves for the component parts. In Japan, they're using the batteries from Nissan Leafs to power refrigerators outside stores in Tokyo. There is talk of potentially use second life batteries that might actually make sense for use as sort of battery storage units within homes. So it's very much a nascent industry still, but you're right in the fact that in the not too distant future, if you've got a battery warranty of sort of 8 or 9 years, you're going to have quite a lot of lithium-ion batteries kicking around, and understanding where those might go in the second life of these batteries is going to be an important part of the puzzle.
So have we got plans to do anything here in Wales, or are we just kind of following Germany, Japan, or just waiting to see what's happening?
I think that I think it's a global problem. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, and apologies if I've got this wrong, I'm not aware of anything that's specifically being looked at in Wales on this front, but please, if there's anyone in the audience who wants to shoot me down on that one, then go for it.
Okay, another question. So our parking is on street. Do I need permission from my local authority to install an on-street charger? And are there any discrete chargers that can reduce the issues associated with on-street chargers?
So the Bad news is, I suppose, that you're not master or mistress of your own destiny on this one, because if you are parking on the street, you immediately have to consider the local authority because they manage the local highway. So you are, if you were looking at purchasing, or you have an electric vehicle and you needed a charging point that's going to be on street, you need to apply through your local authority. The good news is that UK Gov has got something called the Orcs Fund, which is the On-Road Charging Scheme Fund, which is quite hefty and open to any local authority within England, Wales, and I believe Scotland as well. And this fund allows local authorities to invest. It basically funds 75% of the installation of a charge point on the street. And as mentioned in my presentation, the thing is that putting a charge point or installing a charge point on the street is quite a bit more expensive than installing a charge point if you're lucky to have a driveway. So there is that additional cost, but it's actually persuading or making sure that there's a good process within your local authority that allows them to consider putting a charge point on your street. And if there's a few of you, then obviously the case would be stronger to lobby your local authority. And some local authorities are absolutely brilliant. I'm not going to name any names, but there are some really, world-class leading local authorities out there that are doing a great job in this. And there are some local authorities which are a little bit further behind the curve. So you may luck out, you may not, but I think that the point is that you've got to engage your local authority in order to get a good charge point in. In terms of aesthetics, then there are lots of different types of charge point out there that work on the street. So there are some that have been manufactured to be installed in existing street furniture. So I think putting a charge point into a lamppost. But that is one example. And there are also manufacturers that are looking to actually discreetly sink a charge point directly into the pavement, and then it rises when it needs to be activated. So there are several manufacturers that are looking at that as a solution. But it's a manufacturing technological design challenge going forwards as to what's the best way to be able to put it, to deliver what's likely to be a large amount of on-street charging to support those 35-40% of us that don't have access to driveways.
Okay, lovely. So badger your local authority if you don't have one of your
basically
good examples. Yeah. Okay. Good idea. Good suggestion. So you touched on, this is another question, you touched on developments in the feasibility of hydrogen vehicles. Are they likely to supersede electric?
Okay, so I always like to think of this as sort of analogy, and forgive me if you don't remember this, but remember the technology battle between Betamax and VHS. This is not what this is. This is more, I suppose, Android and iOS. So I think most people, as mentioned earlier, would suggest that battery electric vehicles will be the future for most applications. If you think of the amount of investment that manufacturers have put in and the volumes of electric vehicles that you're going to be seeing being announced and being delivered on our roads over the next few years. Having said that, there is definitely a march to a degree on hydrogen, and it can be seen from all sorts of elements, not just in transport, but what transport could be one application for utilizing hydrogen for fuel. Potentially when you're talking about specifically energy intensive vehicles, so things like refuse collection vehicles. So there are trials already happening actually in Aberdeen. I think St Helens as council has just bought a refuse collection vehicle. It's being considered in Cardiff as well. So there's potentially a place for hydrogen to be used as a fuel, said, for these energy intensive vehicles. You've probably seen the buses as well. And obviously there's the play that manufacturers are having at the moment in terms of looking at battery electric solutions for heavy duty trucks and HGVs, and also looking at hydrogen as well. So as I've mentioned earlier, there's government innovation funding looking at both of these technologies, especially in that heavy duty vehicle space, to understand where the right solution is going to be, the most effective cost effective solution is going to be for the future. So I think, yes, I mean, I have no crystal ball, but the point is that there's innovation work going on at the moment in both of those technologies, but it would definitely be looking more at the larger vehicle and potentially more specialist vehicles.
Lovely, thank you. Lots of some nice comments in the chat saying thank you very much for all the information, Jamie. So yes, well done, diolch yn fawr. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Are there any EV charger suppliers offering bilingual services and user interfaces? I think we'll have to create the words in Welsh first for lots of the technology, but yes, so.
So I was thinking about this because my understanding is that the tenders I've seen from sort of Welsh local, from Welsh public sector, especially look at this sort of bilingual sort of instructions actually on the charge points themselves. In terms of the apps, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there's a Welsh company called Clenergy who are based well, clearly in Wales, and they have developed an app in dual language in Welsh as well, which came out, I think, pretty recently. I think it was in the last month or so. So, you know, if you're out and about roaming sort of through Wales, then it's worth having a look at that potentially, because that's definitely that's in the Welsh language. I'm not 100% sure, and apologies, I should have done my homework on this before I came, as to whether some of the more sort of established charge point operators, such as I suppose you've got Dragon. I'm assuming Dragon would have would be in bilingual. I know their website is. I'm not 100% sure about their app. BP Pulse is another, and potentially obviously Swarco, who are installing the rapid charge points on behalf of Transport for Wales. So I would suspect so, but I don't know. Is my honest answer. So apologies for that.
No problem at all. So, okay, next question. How feasible are solar battery solutions like the Tesla Powerwall in the UK? And will rooftop PV panels on the average detached house power a small fleet, for example?
So I think if you were to put solar panels on your roof, and say you put sort of 10 or 12 of them, that would probably be enough to power your car. So not a small fleet would probably be enough to power your car. So you're talking about sort of 4 panels giving you about 1 kilowatt hour. So say 12 panels will give you that sort of 3 kilowatts of power per hour, kind of thing. Now that's all very well if your car is parked on your driveway as the sun is shining and delivering it straight to your car with a PV inverter. But many cases, you know, people are out and about, and it's having that stored energy which is going to be interesting in the future. And that's where you mentioned the Tesla Powerwall. There are other manufacturing brands out there as well. But yeah, having this idea of a battery storage unit which might sit alongside your solar panels. So as you're generating power from your own property, you're actually storing that within a sort of a storage system. And then you actually just draw that power as and when you need it. So if you rock up in your car in the evening and want to charge it, then you've got the power that's been generated on your property during the day to do that for you. Thing is, at the moment, it's not cheap, but then at the moment, either is power. So there's probably I think solar installation companies are definitely rubbing their hands more now that the feed-in tariff closed, whenever it was, a couple of years ago. But now with power prices where they are, the sort of the return on investment that you're getting from installing these kind of systems is probably reducing. And interestingly, today, just this afternoon, as part of the spring statement, energy system assets have just had their VAT taken off them from the Chancellor. So that's hot off the press. I just saw a bit earlier on. So that sort of helps as well, because obviously that starts to bring costs down even further.
Thank you for that. So Kieran has come back. With electric using materials like lithium, but hydrogen being producible, wouldn't it be better to go down that avenue? And also, are there any plans to use water as a fuel source?
So the thing about the hydrogen is that you're going to have naysayers who'd say that hydrogen, in order to produce hydrogen, you're using electricity. So using renewable electricity to produce hydrogen as a fuel to then be used in a vehicle, as opposed to why don't you bypass that whole process and just use the renewable electricity in your vehicle? So there are people that say it doesn't make sense to do that because it's far more sort of cost effective to just plug the renewable electricity straight and into your car that way. In terms of using water as a source, I mean, it's the byproduct of that's the waste product from your hydrogen powered vehicle, from your fuel cell EV. I have no idea, other than obviously using water to generate electricity, whether if any of the tidal systems end up being going ahead. But in terms of actually using water as a fuel source, it's way above. I'm afraid I'm not. I can't really comment. I wasn't very good at science at school.
I could have fooled me. Kelly, have you got anything you'd like to add? Because I think we've run out of questions. I'm just double checking.
No, I don't think there is anything to add. I think Jamie's knowledge and experience is just absolutely second to none. It's been, as I said earlier this afternoon, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, and I'm sure everybody listening out there has really benefited from what you've said. Once again, just reinforcing that if you'd like any direct support on planning your changing your fleet to ultra low emissions, then book a session with Jamie, not me. That's a joke, absolutely. But Business Wales absolutely is available to help you with, even if it's signposting you towards, support with preparing for your change to ultra low emission vehicles, or anything else indeed to do with resource efficiency. Please, come our way, and we do have experts within our team who is able to advise on resource efficiency, reducing carbon emissions, and everything to do with everything that we've heard about during the series this week. So come to Business Wales first is what I would say, and we will point you in the right direction, or help us directly ourselves. Help you directly ourselves. As a tongue tie. And thank you once again. That's probably all I have to say.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Jamie. Diolch yn fawr iawn am bopeth, prynhawn 'ma, and thank you to all for joining us. As Kelly said, make sure that you do book your sessions. The link is in the chat. We're back tomorrow for our final session of the series. We're going to be looking at the design for net zero. I ni nôl fory ar gyfer y sesiwn ola yn y gyfres yma, yn edrych ar dyluniad ar gyfer net zero. Remember, if you have missed a session, you can still catch up with all the sessions that have been held up until now. If you go into Event Box and click on the main room, just click the session you want, and then a video window will open for you. Cofiwch, mae yna gyfle I chi ddal I fyny wrth fynd I fewn I Event Box. But for now, thank you very much for being with us today. Enjoy the rest of the day. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. Welwn ni chi bore eto gobeithio.